Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our virtual Walk with the Future Doc. My name is Lauren, and I'm a fourth year medical student at WVU. And then I also want to mention that I am a student in the Culinary and Lifestyle Medicine track. So I have been doing the Culinary and Lifestyle Medicine track. This will be my fourth year. And this program, Walk with the Future Doc, was started by myself and Mia probably like about a year and a half ago. So we just wanted to mention that. So I just want to take a few moments to explain what will happen over the next hour as we walk together virtually this week. So this week we have Dr. Humerick as a physician leading the conversation on the topic of doctors practicing what they preach, an introduction to culinary medicine. And then as we walk together virtually, we'll open it up for questions that anyone might have. Everyone should have received a pop-up notification through the Zoom app just to consent to the audio recording of this walk. And only the audio portion will be made available publicly on our YouTube channel, which is WVU Walk with the Future Doc. Sorry, I'm multitasking with my dog Luna, and she's pulling me. So I also mentioned that our Facebook page is WVU Walk with the Future Doc, and this is the best place to look for updates about future walks that we're having. So thank you everyone for joining us today, even as the weather is getting a little bit colder. So now I'd like to introduce everyone to Dr. Humerick. She is an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Family Medicine at WVU's Eastern Campus. And she also works with us starting the summer before we start first year in the Culinary and Lifestyle Medicine track. So we're really excited to have her joining us to talk about the topic of doctors practicing what they preach, an introduction to culinary medicine. So with that said, I will let you begin, Dr. Humerick.
Thanks, Lauren. And I just want everybody to be just real interactive. This should be fun. Thanks for having me. I'm excited. I always love coming to walk with you guys, talk with you guys. So I'm one of the associate or co-directors of the Culinary and Lifestyle Medicine track, was started by Dr. Canarella Lorenzetti. And we're lucky to have Dr. Phillips on the call today as well, because she's one of our core faculty members in Morgantown. And we do span all three campuses. So I'm going to have Dr. Phillips and then all of the culinary students that are on the Zoom call chime in as well with all of your experiences. And I know that at the end, you guys have come up with some really cool recipes to share with everybody that we can hopefully try over the holidays. So I want you guys to talk about why you chose those recipes and how you might introduce those to a patient. So I just want to start off. And if I'm like out of breath, it's because I'm walking on the treadmill and I am out of shape right now. So this is really great because I'm getting some fitness in today. And I was on call last night, so I'm a little bit tired, but I can push through. Luckily, they didn't wake me up too much. That was great. So I wanted to start off with, what is culinary medicine? Does anybody know? Has anyone heard of that term? Some of the students might know, but this might be new to others. I didn't know if anyone had heard of it. Maybe some of the medical students. I'm not here seeing any faces. So it's kind of a newer up and coming field in the last 5 to 10 years. And really it's focusing on kind of blending the art of food and cooking with medicine, which isn't something we traditionally learn about in med school. And so what we're trying to do is help patients, make medical decisions about what foods to eat, how do I cook them, and how does that relate to the medical problems that I have. And we're trying to really just improve their medical conditions. One thing that I like about culinary medicine is not only is it about what food you're eating and how you're cooking it, but we're thinking about all the other special things with food. Like, okay, how much does food cost? Do I have access to food? A lot of the students, and I love that you guys are here, but you guys talk about, okay, well, what if their only grocery store is Dollar G? What if their Walmart just shut down? Now they have the closest grocery store is about 30 minutes away. In West Virginia, where transportation is hard, how are they going to make it there? So I think those are some big principles that we also like to teach in culinary medicine that you might not get in the traditional, med school curriculum. And so why did we start teaching culinary medicine at WVU, it all started kind of back in 2014. I was actually a fourth year med student, and Dr. Lorenzetti was teaching this new med chefs curriculum at Eastern Campus. And I was like, well, I want to take that. Like I've never learned about nutrition in medical school. I'd love to do that. So I sat in on the third year's teaching kitchens. So they did a couple over that year. And then that just kind of grew each year where they did more and more teaching kitchens. And I kind of was like, oh, I'm going to stick with this throughout residency when I did family medicine. And that kind of spiraled into Dr. Lorenzetti going, well, I don't want to just teach this to third year medical students. I want to try and fit this into 4 years of medical school. And we do know that like across the country, if you look at what med schools are doing, very few meet the 25-hour minimum, requirement for nutrition education in medical school. So I think what Dr. Lorenzetti's done at WVU is pretty cool, because it's kind of spiraled into med chefs in the third year. Now we have this culinary and lifestyle medicine track. We've got online courses in nutrition. I know Tria Haggerty up in Morgantown is working with students. We've got Melissa Olfert. And then I have the fourth year online course that students can take. So far, when we started this culinary and lifestyle medicine track, it was back in 2018. We just had 7 students graduate. It was our first class last year. And you would think, oh, I'm sure they were all primary care, they all want to just go into family medicine, peds, internal medicine. But actually the 7 students, they went into family med, peds, internal medicine, which is what you expect. Then we had a psychiatrist and a neurosurgeon. So it doesn't just pertain to kind of those traditional primary care specialties. We've got students wanting to do every different specialty. Right now, we just kind of asked our senior resident or senior medical students what they want to do. And in the match this year, they told us orthopedics, general surgery, derm, OBGYN, and then we, of course, have our peds, family med, and IM. So we've got our traditional, but I just love that they're wanting to go on all kinds of different things. And then when I was talking to one of the third years, they were thinking about gastroenterology, which I thought was super cool, because I'm like, of course, why wouldn't a GI doctor want to know about nutrition and how it interacts with all of the GI illnesses they see? So right now we have 47 students at WVU across all 4 classes, in addition to the 7 that we just graduated last year. So these students, they do about 300 hours approximately of additional education over 4 years. And we like to call it the 4 pillars of wellness. We teach them about nutrition, physical activity, restorative sleep, and stress management. And one thing we know is that, and why we stress it so heavily, like you'd be like, why in the world are they doing 300 hours? That's a lot when you think about med school. But we're very conscious, like we try to spread it out and make sure it's not around their tests and everything. But what we know is when you read about it, doctors that actually practice what they preach, doctors that are out there exercising, eating healthy, they are more likely to counsel patients about those things, nutrition, physical activity. So by helping the students kind of learn about this stuff, what we found and what they tell us, they're like, hey, what I noticed is, and Mia, Lauren, everybody on the call, you guys can chime in now, but just tell us, like, how has it changed what you guys do in your personal lives? Because what you guys tell me on Soul, when people respond to kind of the questions I ask, it's like, wow, I didn't realize how much I changed my own nutrition, my own sleep patterns. I don't know. Can you guys kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I can chime in about that too. So I'll say, I feel like I have changed the way that I eat. And I don't know if my family's on the call right now, but like my mom, my dad, my sister, my like immediate family, like we all have changed the way we eat and are much more conscious of the things that we eat. And so I had looked up some of the recipes that I had shared that we were going to go over today too. And these are recipes. Some of them are ones that my family actually, we now eat on Thanksgiving and like regularly. So it's like little changes that like you don't feel like you're missing out on anything, but they are like healthier, more like mindful food choices. So I feel like diet wise, like doing the culinary and lifestyle medicine track, I've changed the way that I eat, and then I'm able to like when I talk to patients, like throughout third and fourth year, I can say like, these are things that I actually do as well.
Lauren, that's awesome. Have you asked your family, like, or have you heard them also start to talk about food differently with other family members now that you've introduced them to that?
I think so. And like, especially on like Thanksgiving and more so like with the holidays. So one of the recipes I shared was cauliflower, or not cauliflower mac and cheese, cauliflower mashed potatoes, essentially. And we started making those like probably my first or second year of med school for the holidays. And now like we eat them all the time. My mom has perfected the recipe, and like you don't even realize you're not eating potatoes.
I love it. I love it. And anybody else want to kind of chime in about how it's changed you or your family or friends? I know I see Mia and Megan.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. One of the other pillars of like culinary medicine that I don't think we've touched on yet is sleep, which I think is so important as a med student. So for me, I really tried to focus, especially the first 2 years of medical school, on how much sleep I was getting and if it was quality sleep. So I think that that was super important for me, and I really didn't think about it before. I could sometimes with like sleep less hours during the week and then like catch up on the weekend, which isn't too great to like let your mind resettle and reorganize your like the things that you've learned throughout the week. So throughout the culinary medicine track, I really realized how important sleep every day is for me to just be on my best game, whether I'm going to a clinic or whether I'm like having a hard day of studying the next day. It's super important.
Yeah, you're so right. Sleep is so important. It impacts everything we do. It impacts our health. One thing we should plug, Mia, at the end of the talk is that we, in the track, we give the students this book. I recommend this book to everybody. It is written for just the general public, but it's Matthew Walker's book called Why We Sleep. We had the third years read it about 2 years ago. I got this as a recommendation from a friend. My whole family has read this book. And the seniors that just graduated told us, like, after reading that book, they completely changed their sleep habits, which is awesome because going into residency, you really have to worry about sleep. But everybody on the call should read this book. It will explain why we need as much sleep as we do, why you might have symptoms, of all these chronic medical conditions if you're not getting enough sleep. So maybe we can include that in a link at the end. And there's also some really great YouTube talks by Matthew Walker. He's a PhD in sleep science, and they're awesome. So we should check those out and put those up at the end of the talk. Anybody else want to chime in about your experiences or ways it's impacted your family, friends? Oh, and I see Mia posting the cauliflower mash. I'm telling you, that is the best recipe ever. I always will tell patients about mashed cauliflower. And one thing that I also love about the track is that this thing has snowballed. I mean, look at what you, Mia, and Lauren have done with Walk with the Future Doc. You guys are impacting fellow students, other doctors, patients. I mean, it's awesome. And people can view these talks while they're walking. It's great. We've expanded the teaching kitchens across the School of Medicine because we have buy-in from admin. They're like, yes, let's get every student talking about nutrition. So we do teaching kitchens for Charleston and Morgantown campuses, in addition to Eastern. I have about 50 students a year out of the fourth year class take the 2-week online elective in nutrition, which is great. Even if they're just learning a little pearl and nugget here and there, that's all I need. And then the students, you guys, in addition to Walk with the Doc, you've kind of led this ripple effect. You have the culinary interest group. You guys are doing community health research. I mean, many of you guys in the track are cooking at the food pantries locally. You just have become leaders. So I think it's really cool. So what I want to move into is, what exactly are we teaching? Like when we talk about nutrition is such a broad field, like how in the world, and this is always the argument we've had as faculty at WVU, how do we teach nutrition principles that everybody can agree on? because there are so many things out there online. What is the best diet? Oh, is it low calorie? Is it low fat? You know, is it low carb? What do we tell people? But I think what we've landed on is that there are some universal principles that we can teach pretty much everybody and every patient that are gonna cause healthy effects on the body. So what we, as our basis, and I'll focus a little bit more on nutrition today because just because I have to narrow it down, but we've landed on pretty much the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet is something that is kind of a platform we can start with and build on, because you can always tweak it. We can make the Mediterranean diet lower carbohydrate for people. We can help with portion size and make it a little lower calorie. But the things that we like about it is it helps increase healthy fat in the diet. And I would say most Americans are deficient in healthy fat, okay? Decreasing sources of unhealthy fat, which is really our processed food source. Americans, by far, 60% of the diet is processed food. So by decreasing that, we're eliminating unhealthy fat, and we're gonna try to increase healthy fat. We're gonna try to decrease sugar and processed carbohydrates and highly refined carbohydrates and move towards whole foods, whole grains, and more complex carbohydrates. And then we're gonna increase non-starchy vegetables, which help with fiber. Really what we're getting at with the whole grains and vegetables, the increasing fiber in the diet. We wanna increase antioxidants. So we're talking about foods that are the color of the rainbow, blues, reds. Pick foods with color. And then, improving sources of protein. So in addition to teaching those foundational principles, we're also going to think about the cost of food, location, availability. How do people like to eat? In West Virginia, people like to eat a certain way. So how can we make food taste good for them so that they're more likely to try it? We have to think about where are they cooking? How are they cooking? Do they have equipment? And then we got to think about quality and taste. One thing we found out at the food pantries is that they don't get spice donations. So people that are going there for food, you're getting processed basics. You're not getting those additional ingredients that are going to help you cook tasty food at home. So one thing we had the local Rotary Club do is donate spices to the pantry, and they go quick, especially the chili spices. People love the spices where you can make a one-pot meal. So chili spices go really fast. So just as an example, we do this with every med student who does the online course, but also the culinary track. We're going to each calculate our med diet score. So you're going to need your fingers. Sorry if you're wearing mittens without fingers, but the med diet score is on a scale of 0 to 9. Okay, so I'm going to give you 9 things. You guys are going to calculate how many points you get. And then we'll show you how we would teach a patient to improve their med diet score. All right. So number 1, and we're going to post this handout in the links. So in case you want to do this with family or friends later over Thanksgiving, you guys can help calculate their med diet scores. All right. Number 1, 2 or more cups of vegetables a day. If you eat 2 or more cups of vegetables, give yourself a point. And if you don't, 0. All right. Second category, fruit. If you eat 2 or more pieces of fruit a day, give yourself a 1. If not, it's a 0. All right. Next one, whole grains. If you eat 2 or more whole grains in a day, give yourself a point. So what I'm talking about is things where whole wheat is listed as the first ingredient. This could be whole grain bread. This could be things like quinoa, barley, those types of grains. This could be, trying to think of another example right now, oatmeal. Anybody else want to throw out a whole grain that they like to eat? All right, and this would be the category where if you're eating popcorn, thank you, corn, yes. Corn is a whole grain. If you're eating a lower carb diet, this category is usually the one we try to decrease, and we'll talk more about that later. So you may not get this point if you're doing a lower carbohydrate diet. All right, next category would be wine. So if you drink a half to 1 drink a day for women, or 1 to 2 for men, give yourself a point. If not, give yourself a 0. Next category is going to be fish. Oh, and a drink, I want to say 5 ounces. 1 drink is going to be 5 ounces of wine. For fish, 2 or more servings a week. These are going to be servings the size of your palm. All right. The next category is going to be legumes or beans. So garbanzo, maybe cannellini, pinto. If you eat 2 or more servings a week, go ahead and give yourself a point. Next category is going to be nuts or seeds. So a handful of nuts, just a small palm full of nuts most days of the week. And then next category is fat, lots of olive oil, a few other fats. If you use mostly olive oil to cook, less of the butter, vegetable oil is really the one we're concerned about here. But olive oil, canola oil, go ahead and give yourself a point. Last category is going to be red meat, 2 servings or less a week. That's going to be kind of the palm of your hand or less a week. All right, everybody calculate your score. Any brave folks out there want to throw out your score and kind of what you were deficient in?
I got a 3, so I was deficient in all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of eye-opening when we do it, right? I was gonna say, I'm only a 5 when I look at all that. And that's after teaching this for many years. I'm like, dang it. I think I still eat too much red meat. Anybody else want to throw out?
I was proud of myself for getting a 6.
Hey, who was that just talked?
That was me. I was proud of myself for getting a 6.
Oh, hey, Christina. 6 is great. Anybody else want to throw out a score? And it's okay if you don't.
So believe it or not, I only scored 2 points. My diet's mostly carnivore, so it's carnivore plus fruit. So I do eat a lot of fruit, but a lot of my diet's red meat, and I personally feel great on it, but I know that not everyone would agree with me.
Are you doing a low carb diet, Michael?
Yeah, because really the only carbohydrate I eat is fruit. Whole grains I think are healthy, but I'm just not a fan of them,
Yeah, are you doing berries as your fruit, lower carb fruit?
No, not really. Oranges, bananas, apples is mostly my fruit, but
Okay.
Fruit's not that big of a percentage of my diet. I wouldn't really call myself low carb. More, I think carnivore is the more accurate adjective.
Lots of protein. Okay. What score do you guys think the average American diet is? If you had to guess, like what would most Americans fit? Oh, I see a 2. Yeah.
I'll guess
lots
3.
of 2s. A 3. Okay. I see a 4. Okay. For those of you that said 2, what categories do you think most Americans, would say that they meet?
I imagine the red meat category is very popular.
Yeah. Anybody else want to throw out, like, what do they think Americans would give themselves a point for?
I think they might.
Wait, wasn't the red meat one supposed to be like 2 or less, or was it 2 or more?
2 or less. 2 or less.
Okay. Wine and fruit.
Wine and fruit. Nice. Okay. We surveyed our patients a couple years ago. Lauren and Mia, was that your class? One of the classes we did it.
My class did surveys.
Do you remember?
That summer?
Yeah. Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know. I would have to look back at it.
So when they look at it, most Americans are going to fit between a 0 and a 3. Average is probably going to be a 2. Most of them definitely eat fruit. So they try to eat, and it's all about a wide variety of fruit, whole grains. They will typically think they eat a lot of whole grains. Sometimes, yes, they will say, we're not eating as much red meat. And it's the food pantry population, definitely, they're not getting a lot of the meat. But it's funny because you would think, like, with lunch meat and stuff, they might get over that, but they don't, because meat is expensive, they tend to eat more carbohydrates than meat when I surveyed them. So yeah, that's interesting. You guys hit it nail on the head. So when we surveyed patients, Lauren, Mia, do you guys remember, like, what would you guys say? So you did their Mediterranean diet score. And then what did you guys do to help the patients? Sorry,
Afterwards,
putting you on the spot.
no, you're fine. So afterwards, so we went through all the components of like the Mediterranean diet score. And then afterwards, we would ask them like, what is like one or maybe two areas that you feel like you could make little changes in your diet to like increase your score. So then we would kind of talk to them and see what areas they thought they could make some changes in.
Nice. Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. Because what we know is that the higher the score, the lower, when they study the Mediterranean diet score, and the reason why we're doing this, they did studies, when the higher the score, the lower risk of mortality, lower risk of heart attack and stroke. And in one study, this is with a women's health study, scores of 6 or above were 30% less likely to have diabetes. So we know that for every increase in the score, we decrease all kinds of things. They did it in kids, and they showed decreased risk of obesity, the higher risk of sores and abdominal obesity. So we have all kinds of good benefits the more we can increase the score. Of course, there's one category on there that we're like, listen, if you don't drink, we're not telling you to drink. So if you don't drink wine and you don't want to drink alcohol, don't drink alcohol. We can get into that later if you guys have more questions about alcohol. Some of the scores, instead of nuts and seeds being a separate category, in one of the original studies, fruit, nuts, and seeds were in the same category, and dairy was a second. I like this med diet score handout that we'll give you, which separates those two categories, just because I think they're two different things entirely. So other studies that were done after the first one, they separated those out, like things like PreDiMed, that study separated it. And I think that makes more sense to me. I'd like to see what are the outcomes when we have fruit in its own category. So, why do we like this med diet score? And really it's because it kind of teases out how much healthy fat are you guys eating? Are you eating healthier sources of carbs versus unhealthier sources of carbohydrates? Are you eating healthier sources of protein? That's kind of up for debate. I know there have been studies that, that are not linking saturated fat to heart attacks, because that's really why America moved to a lower fat diet. We thought, we moved to lower fat, cut out the butter, cut out red meat, we're going to decrease heart attacks. That may or may not have been exactly true. I can't say saturated fat from animal protein is protective, but it may not be detrimental. And for Michael, that might be a good thing. Right, Michael? You don't want to have heart attacks from eating all your carnivore diet.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I eat, most of the fat I eat is butter. I rarely ever use any.
Okay, all right, awesome. Well, we'll talk about butter. So that's awesome. So, other studies done on the Mediterranean diet, when you look at it, they see decreased cardiovascular events across the board. So, the percentage will range, and that's up for debate. But we do know the healthier that you eat, and really, in those categories, the more those categories that you're meeting, you're going to decrease your events. You're going to decrease your diabetes risk. So I wanted to get into individually. Some people would argue, all right, well, the Mediterranean diet, that's still about 50% carbs. Like, we counsel out at Eastern a lot about using a lower carb way of eating for diabetes. So I'm curious, if you have a diabetic, Mia, Lauren, anybody else on the call, what would you guys say for someone with sugar problems when you're counseling on healthy nutrition? And especially when you think about the Mediterranean diet, how much you tweak it for them?
I just wanted to add something. Sorry. I lived with a type 1 diabetic for a few months and learned a lot. And sometimes what he would do is he would pair his carbs with a protein and eat them like at the same time. And the
Love
carbs
it.
tended to be slow, complex carbs like sweet potato, oatmeal, rather than a piece of cake that would spike his sugar real quick.
I love it. Do you guys know what she's talking about? What principle she is talking about? Anybody know? And you may or may not have talked about this in school. So really what she's getting,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, is that getting at like the glycemic index of foods or no? I don't know.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So when you eat carbs with fat and protein, you're gonna decrease the glucose spike, which will then decrease your insulin spike. So, and for type 1 that's not producing insulin, you're gonna need less insulin because that sugar is not gonna spike if you eat your complex carbs, which I love because complex carbs have fiber, beautiful, with your protein and fat. You're gonna slow the absorption of that sugar and you're gonna get a decrease in that glucose spike. So one thing we're gonna wanna tell them, like you said, switch out any highly processed carb, something that's not whole grain, into a whole grain. And I'm telling you, it works. There are some people that eat cereal every day for breakfast. Cereal is, I think, my enemy number one for me. If we could get kids off of cereal and don't start them on cereal, we could do so much good. Because you think about a breakfast of cereal with milk and a banana, classic breakfast. If you ask anybody, oh, my father-in-law, I keep trying, get off the Cheerios, man. But if you get them off of that, switch them to oatmeal, a lot of them do amazing, even though oatmeal has a lot of carbohydrates, but they could see a drastic decrease in their sugar. Dr. Lewis had a patient do that. They dropped do you guys know what an A1C is? It's a kind of the diabetic's average blood sugar over 3 months. It went from like 8 down to 5. It was crazy. It was a crazy change just by decreasing breakfast. A breakfast of a bowl of cereal, milk, and a banana is like 60 grams of carbohydrates. Just do oatmeal. Maybe they put a little bit of half and half heavy cream in it with a little bit of butter, some stevia. You're going to decrease the grams of carbs down to 30. You've got complex carbs. They're going to really slow absorption. And you're going to get a less of a sugar spike. Here's the thing though. Every diabetic's different. There are some diabetics who would eat that bowl of oatmeal and it's not the one with the maple syrup, or what is it called? There's some with maple sugar and all that. What is it? Brown sugar and cinnamon and apple. You know, it's all the ones that come in the packages. They'll eat that and their sugar will spike. So what I usually will tell diabetics,
Instant oatmeal.
Thank you. Instant oatmeal. They will eat that. Check your sugar afterwards. The key to this is check your sugars 1 to 2 hours after you eat that. If your sugar spikes, definitely above 150. But if your sugar spikes above that, you're not going to want to eat that. Your body just can't tolerate it. The same goes for different types of beans. Some diabetics, their sugar doesn't spike as much with garbanzo beans compared to a pinto bean, black beans. Same thing with different breads. Some diabetics could eat the Ezekiel bread or pumpernickel bread, I've heard. All my diabetics are different, but they'll test their sugar after they eat something like that compared to white bread. So, and Christina, you might have noticed that with the, in a type 1 too, different types, even though it's both bread, it might spike differently. I think it was Christina. I'm sorry if I messed up. Who was talking about
Yeah, that was
type 1
me.
diabetes.
We were constantly looking for the Ezekiel, the low carb tortillas, all that stuff.
I'm curious with the low carb tortilla, how did that do? Did it spike as much or was it better? The 5 gram net carb?
I think he was okay with it because he would smother it in peanut butter.
Okay, I love it. Yeah, I would usually recommend those 5 gram net carbs, low carb tortillas compared to the regular, because a regular tortilla, you're looking at 30 grams, 20 to 30 grams of carbs. So I try to move my diabetics to that way. All right.
Corn tortillas also do a lot better than wheat tortillas.
Perfect. So you could tell them to go ahead and try that, check your sugar and see where you go. I love that you guys brought up though. It's great. Mac and cheese is another big one. If you have somebody sit down and just eat a pure bowl of mac and cheese, which is mainly carbs, they're probably going to have a big sugar spike. But if you were to combine that with other food groups, it may lower it. Usually for pasta is a hard one. Do you guys have any suggestions for people that love pasta to try and decrease their sugar spikes?
I started doing spaghetti squash, and I know it's not the same as pasta, like for people who are big pasta people, but I love it, and I actually think it tastes better than pasta now that I'm used to it, because I feel like I'm actually eating something like of substance rather than just like some squishy thing. And so I think if someone can get used to that, that's a really great alternative.
Love it. Hey, Emily, I should have called you out more. All right, perfect. Spaghetti squash is great. Much lower carb, lots of fiber. Anybody else have a pasta go-to?
I love zoodles or zucchini noodles.
Love it. Another one at the store you guys may or may not have seen. A lot of times it's next to the tofu, but there's pasta zero, and it's made from a shirataki noodle. It's actually a root vegetable that they've made into a noodle. I don't know what it is. It's magic. It's no calories, no carbs. But if you put it in, you rinse the noodles and put it into your sauce, and it really kind of softens the noodle a little bit. It tastes great. It's the consistency of a real noodle. So I like that one for people with issues with their sugar. And also weight loss. It's great because decreasing the calories and the carbs. So pasta zero, zucchini noodles, spaghetti squash. I also like just taking away the noodle altogether. So we'll do cauliflower mac and cheese. The other thing we love, because you can just chop up the cauliflower, let it roast, and then you can put any pasta that you were going to do, just put it over the cauliflower. Cauliflower pizza casserole is a great way to make, I'm mixing up my bread now, to make a great pizza tasting dish without having to make a crust, because that takes a long time. So a 30-minute meal, instead of a cauliflower pizza crust, you're going to just do pizza casserole. The kids love that one. So the bottom line of what we're trying to teach people there is replace the highly refined carbs with the more complex, decrease carbohydrates in the diet compared to the standard American diet. And then when you think about it, when you're doing that, you can eat a lot more of the non-starchy foods and eat less calories than if you were to eat, in the example we use is like a hamburger bun compared to a plate of, vegetables, more whole grains, things like that are a little less carbohydrate dense. So you're going to fill up your belly a little bit more when you eat more of that stuff compared to, that white bread that you were going to eat. Michael brought up fruit. I think this is a great question. What would you think, and how would you counsel a patient that loves fruit? What do you know about fruit? What does it do, for people with diabetes? Do we need to cut fruit out altogether? What would you say to somebody that loves fruit?
So, I can only speak for what I've looked at, but I've never seen any really solid research showing that bad things can happen when you eat too much fruit. I mean, maybe that research is out there, but as of now, I think I don't think limiting fruit consumption is supported by research, at least not that I've seen.
Okay. I like it. Anybody else have thoughts?
Another comment related to fruit is if someone is drinking a lot of fruit juice, really encourage them to actually eat the actual fruit.
Yes, that's great. So Michael, I would agree with you, right? That I'm not going to call any food inherently evil. And I do not think that whole fruit is something that has to be avoided altogether. I do agree with Lauren. If you're eating something that is fruit juice, does not have the fiber, it's not the whole fruit, that's the simplest thing we can cut out right away. I hate to say that. And I wish that fruit was taken out, or fruit juice, even 100% fruit juice was taken out of something that we give kids, because I can't say that there's any benefit to that. We'll give it if they're constipated sometimes, But if I'm trying to help a kid eat healthy, I'd much rather them eat the piece of fruit than drink the juice to help with their overall health. Weight, if I am concerned about weight, that's an easy, low hanging, thing that we can try to reduce. But as far as a diabetic, so let's, in a general population, I would say moderate fruit, not excessive fruit consumption, but moderate fruit consumption, a few servings a day is okay. And someone that's diabetic, I would say check your sugar, because there are some fruits, they tend to be the tropical fruits. We're talking pineapple, we're talking bananas. Pick your fruit. If they check their sugar and it spikes, especially if they're eating it by itself and not with the other food groups, like with fat and protein, then what I would say is try something with a little more fiber and less sugar load. So things like berries tend to be very low carbohydrate. So if I have a diabetic that loves fruit, I might say, hey, let's decrease the portions you're having, because some of them eat it all day long. They'll eat orange for breakfast, banana for, it's just overkill. Let's decrease it. If your sugar is still spiking, why don't we try berries, blueberries, strawberries, and see what your sugar does. Some people, an apple and a peanut butter is a great snack, so their sugar won't spike with that. Same thing, you could try banana and peanut butter and see if their sugar spikes, and if it does, switch to something different. Anybody else have little tips and tricks of fruit combinations or things they've seen with patients or their own family members that works as far as fruit goes?
I personally really like sweets, and so and I don't like eating fruit. Like, I much prefer ice cream over banana. So what I've been working on doing is making fruit into a dessert and like utilizing the natural sugars that's in that, and then like and replacing my dessert. So an example would be last night I made instead of making apple pie, I like sliced apples up and then just covered them in like a little bit of plant butter and like cinnamon and allspice and bake them, and they tasted just like an apple pie because of the natural sugar. And then also using like bananas and peanut butter and yogurt, full fat yogurt, to make ice cream has been a really great way to like increase using fruit and cut out sweets at the same time.
That sounds so good. Anybody else have tips or tricks?
Emily, I'll add to something about that. I baked a peach before and just did like maple syrup and cinnamon. And then instead of ice cream or whipped cream on top, I just mixed a little bit of like full fat Greek yogurt with some vanilla and cinnamon and put it on top, and it melted like ice cream or like whipped cream.
That sounds amazing. I'll have to try that.
During the summer, we were doing some air fried nectarines, so equivalent to grilled, and just by themselves. And they were perfectly sweet, great dessert. My girls loved them.
That sounds so good. How did you do that?
I just cut them into quarters, got them off the pit. I'd have to look up the time and temperature again, but I can send it in the chat a little bit later. But one thing I like to do,
great.
One thing I like to do for my patients who have diabetes or are trying to lose weight, especially if they have a very strong addiction to chocolate, I'll recommend they get a dark chocolate and pair it up with berries. And that way you're getting the natural sugars from the fruit, but it's a low carb fruit. And then you getting the flavor of the cocoa from the dark chocolate. So it's a good way to kind of get rid of the high fat, high sugar milk chocolate, still get the sweetness and the chocolate flavor that you're looking for. And you're getting a lot more antioxidants.
Yeah, I love it. Melody, that's a great point, is that if we cut out fruit completely, a lot of times that's our source of those reds and purple colors in our diet that we're talking about. That's why, Michael, I agree with you. Like, just saying that we should cut that out. I mean, that's a huge source of fiber and antioxidants in our American diets. And I would agree that I don't think that we need to cut that out completely to, have a healthy diet. So that was a great point. And especially for kids, when, kids and all the moms and dads in the group could agree, that's like finding healthy food that gives that, it takes away that sweet craving our kids have, is a great thing instead of fruit snacks. Fruit snacks are my enemy number one in this house. Have any of you guys done 1-ingredient banana ice cream? That's a great thing with kids too, to do in the summer. You can chop up a banana into little round slices, throw them in the freezer in a baggie. And then as soon as they're really hard and frozen, you can take them out, put them in any blender you've got, like it could be a little one or a big one. And if you want to add some flavor, you could add in a couple strawberries or blueberries, whatever. Peanut butter would be great too. And you can make ice cream out of that, because when you blend it when it's frozen, it's really got an ice cream consistency and it tastes delicious. So you could try that, and it's very simple and quick. Good to do with your bananas that are going bad too. Let's see, how much time do we have?
Well, I was just gonna say that we should probably start wrapping it up, because we're getting close to the end of the hour. But I think there's a lot of really great things that we've shared, hopefully tips for people. And Taylor just posted that Mediterranean diet score that we were going through earlier into the chat room, in case you'd like to take it later, do it with your family and friends. And we'll also post that as well as the recipes on our Facebook page. So if you're looking for things to cook for Thanksgiving, doing a little like healthier twist on a traditional recipe, we have 4 or 5 recipes there for you. And we'll also be sending them out in an email too. So Dr. Humerick, do you want to wrap it up for us? Maybe give like a big takeaway from your talk today, something you were hoping people would get out of it?
Yeah, I think that, well, number one, we thought as a challenge to everybody that maybe in a couple months we could all reconvene and everybody share their med diet score again, to see if any of us increased our Mediterranean diet score over the next couple weeks to months, just based on these little tidbits we learned today. So that could be really fun. The other takeaway is that I hope that it came across that there is no one right diet for everyone, and that you can just hear from all the comments everybody made is that we really have to individualize it to each person. And each person is going to have different needs and different circumstances when it comes to food and feeding their families. So that's one big thing we want to think about. There are some just general healthy diet principles that we can talk about with everybody. And Mia, we could post those to the group. But one of the main takeaways today was eat real food. Cut out processed food and eat real food. Eat colorful food, colors of the rainbow. Recognize, refined carbohydrates versus maybe healthier carbohydrates with more fiber and antioxidants, whole grains. Things that we didn't get into as much today are, we talked a little bit about healthy fat, but eating more healthy fat and less sources of saturated fat. So we're talking about nuts, plant sources like avocados and olive oil. And then just knowing your portion sizes, and being mindful and reasonable when you eat. But I think those are the main takeaways. Like I said, we can post those. And if any of you have questions or want to talk more about each individual category, we could do so at subsequent walks, but it was really fun to talk to you guys.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Humerick, for leading the conversation today. And thanks to everyone else for joining us on this Saturday morning. So right now, Taylor is going to post in the chat room a link to our survey. We're just trying to see who's at our walks and what your response is towards the conversation today, and also any ideas that you have moving forward. We have 2 more walks before the new year, and then we'll start with a whole new series of walks in January. So we hope that you join us again. If this is your first time walking with us, awesome. I'm so proud of you for getting out on this Saturday morning and getting your steps in before your day started. But if you guys need anything, our Facebook page is Walk with a Future Doc at WVU School of Medicine. You can find all of our events there, as well as the recipes we talked about today and the Mediterranean diet score. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope to see you again soon. And thanks for seeing all your friendly faces virtually. We hope to see you again. One more thing, if you're in the chat right now, we're trying to track who is walking with us and where you are. So if you wouldn't mind typing your name and writing who you are and where you're walking from, we're just trying to see how far this program reaches. So thanks again for joining us. Have a great weekend, and let's go Mountaineers. Oh, and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.